problem. No problem, Henry.
So Barry, where are you based?
I'm based in Sydney, Anantha.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
How is the weather there like?
We're getting into autumn now, sort of autumn going.
Joe's finally joining us.
But in Sydney, it's actually, I mean, it's still quite warm. It's quite pleasant today, actually, still. Yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Anna. Hi, John.
Hi, Joe. Good to see you. Good to see you here. How are you?
Hi,
Good
Kamal.
morning.
Great to see you. I'm well. It's early, you know.
I know 6 a.m. I understand in New York.
It is, yeah. It's
Well,
it's all right. This is my usual schedule, so it's all right.
Okay, good. At least you're used to it. Okay, I'm happy. At least I don't feel guilty then.
No, don't feel guilty.
And Alessandra is joining us. She's gracing us with her presence.
Excuse me for a minute.
Good afternoon, Prakash. It has been a while we met.
Hello, Alessandra. Good to see you.
It's been a while, yes.
Hi, guys.
We should
Great
catch
to-
up later.
Yes. Good
Hi, Alessandra.
morning,
Great to have you.
Alessandra.
How are you?
Hi there. I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great, thank you. Okay, 2 more people. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. We'll start in a couple of minutes. We've got quite a few people joining us now, so
Give it one more minute, Kunal.
yeah, no problem. Just waiting for people.
Okay, I say we let's kick off the meeting, and
Yeah.
we'll invite people as they continue to come. I do expect more participants. So thank you everyone so much for joining us for Impact Economy on SDGs and Urbanization in Asia Pacific. I kindly ask everyone to please mute yourselves while you're not speaking, just for ease of conversation. To kick off our meeting, I would like to introduce Mr. Anthana Krishnan, Secretary General of the Urban Economy Forum. Anthana has over 40 years of experience in international development work, including over 15 years with the United Nations in Nairobi, Kenya, working for both UNEP and UN Habitat, engaged in urban youth empowerment initiatives, policy and research advocacy, program management, as well as development and implementation of projects. Anthana Krishnan, as we know, is currently holding the position of Secretary General for Urban Economy Forum, looking at the ways and means to strengthen the economics of cities and towns, supporting the implementation of sustainable development goals at the city level, and to deliver services, including in housing and health sectors. Mr. Krishnan.
Thank you, Alex, for your kind words. Dear Alessandra Solberger, founder of Top Tier Impact, moderators Alex Venuto, City Leader Platform Secretary at Urban Economy Forum, Kunal Kriplani, Top Tier Impact, Frank DeHond, Secretary General ISOCARP, Barry Polti, founder of EQ Capital Partners, Lin Su, Research Center for Urban and Environmental Studies, Dr. Henry Chen, Head of Research, CBRE, and Joe Mcdonald, founder of A&O Design, and dear participants. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome. It is so exciting to be here. At Urban Economy Forum, we have been looking forward to this day for quite some time. We are thrilled to be finally here with you, with all of you. Thanks to Kunal, Alessandra, Anastasia, and other colleagues at the TTI. We're lucky to have visionary and inspiring speakers here that have been directly involved in planning and forging investments to sustainable development also in the urban context. They can provide us with unique insights on what it takes to plan and create opportunities for investments that can remedy centuries of exploitative development models that have harmed humanity and nature alike. Urban Economy Forum, as many of you would know, is a multi-stakeholder international non-government organization primarily focusing on promoting urban economy and sustainable urban resources at the local and the global level to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or the SDGs. UEF, Urban Economy Forum, is designed to create a space where local and global dialogues intersect to identify and share urban opportunities and challenges to innovative solutions to sustainable urbanism. Hence, this dialogue on impact economy on SDGs and urbanization in Asia and Pacific, also in preparation for our third International Urban Economy Forum to be held on 4th and 5th October, is very opportune indeed. It's now widely accepted that investing can do more than just build personal wealth. It can also be a powerful tool to improve the world we live in through impact investing in projects that are based not only on financial performance, but also on environmental, social, and governance criteria. Take the basic definition of impact investing, or ESG, as they say short form. Investing typically screens opportunities for environmental, social, and governance issues while still aiming, maybe first and foremost, to maximize financial returns. Impact investments goes beyond the so-called the do no harm approach, that one that actively seeks companies and projects that can have a positive impact. The catchphrase, as all of us know, do good while doing well. Impact investors who wish to know whether the investment will actually contribute to achieving their social investments or environmental objectives. That's also an important aspect of it. An impact investor seeks to produce beneficial social outcomes. By social, I mean environmental governance as well, that would not occur but for her investment in a social enterprise. The international development and carbon market, for example, this is what we call as additionality. The World Bank took initiative for the adoption of new market standards for impact investing 2 years ago. We are celebrating 2 years since it was signed. Now there are 125 members in that standards signatories, a collective of about 371 billion in assets. They are adhering to the principles and contending with the fact that investments made into companies or organizations with the intent to contribute to measurable, positive, social, environmental, or corporate governance impact alongside financial returns. So what's important here is the measurement. Measurement remains an issue. Some experts even say an existential one. Measurement standards will help avoid suspicions that investors are exaggerating their claims about impact, a practice what is called as impact washing, just like greenwashing for the environmental aspect of it. The international measurable impact must be woven into the heart of those investments. So we need to safeguard the integrity of impact investing, since this is a relatively new phenomenon as compared to the CSR, which has been there for at least 3 decades. In this context, what I would like to also introduce here is the World Urban Pavilion, which is an initiative of the Urban Economy Forum being set up in cooperation with the Government of Canada and United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat. It can play an important role. It is a virtual pavilion and a physical pavilion based in Toronto. It can play an important role as knowledge and information hub, where various reporting initiatives for measuring impact investments can be gathered, analyzed, so that guidance can be given for investing in targeted, measurable impact without compromising financial returns. The pavilion that also works across cities and communities can ensure the need for the industry to do a better job while being accountable to communities that are directly impacted by the projects, as individuals living near working at the sites bear sometimes risk of investments that may have unintended environmental and social consequences. The Pavilion is also designed to cooperate with various networks to measure impact performance of direct impact investments, for example, in housing and clean energy access, two sectors in which impact investors are now increasingly showing interest. Of course, the governments need to play a role in safeguarding the integrity of impact investing and to helping it achieve to scale. We are working in the context of governments as well. As the years tick down to 2030, the deadline for UN Sustainable Development Goals is approaching. Pressure will only build to demonstrate that investors don't have to choose between making money and doing good. And investors are realizing that caring about the environment, thinking about social justice, gender equity, governance, other issues around social impact can help their investment strategy because there's no option. Today, as we're seeing, it's clear that impact investing is here to stay. It's all about people, planet, prosperity, peace, and not the least partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krishnan, for sharing your remarks on the importance of impact investing and the need to continue to move forward with impact investing, and as well about the World Urban Pavilion as a platform to help facilitate the collaboration between the private sector as well as governments. Go ahead, Kuno.
Thank you very much, Alex. So I've got the honor as a community member of Top Tier Impact to introduce you to Alessandra Solberger. She is a serial entrepreneur and an active technology investor. She's also the founder of Top Tier Impact, the global sustainability-focused ecosystem of leading investors, entrepreneurs, and sector experts. She's also the founder of Blockchain Mavericks, the platform educating smart professionals on how to leverage blockchain technology to be part of the shift to capitalism 2.0. And she's got some very exciting things to share with us today about her current work with Top Tier Impact and blockchain, and just in general, the impact investing space in the Asia Pacific context. Please go ahead, Alessandra.
I was on mute. Here we go. Hi, guys. Great to be here. So, as you know, by virtue of being here, we have reached a unique moment in time in human history. And at this point, we are either going to create a new paradigm of living, or we're going to destroy ourselves in the process. And Top Tier Impact focuses on this new paradigm of living. We see impact as a positive paradigm shift towards sustainability and equality across all economic sectors and all countries around the world. Top Tier Impact is present across more than 40 countries at this point. We are impact investors, entrepreneurs, corporate leaders. TTI as a group has various different units, but everything has our ecosystem in common, our private ecosystem, and we see the trends in the impact space. We focus on concrete solutions, we focus on creating synergies, and on pragmatic paths forward towards goals that are as bold as net zero energy transition goals. Because, again, as you guys will know, right now we're still missing technology, policy, we're missing a few key pieces to make these goals possible, and ideally even more than that, right? So on these diverging paths towards utopia and dystopia, TTI focuses very concretely on what that utopia looks like across all economic sectors. What are we going to do from a policy perspective, from an investment flow perspective at scale? We match a lot of impact funds and climate funds with institutional providers of capital and families that are coming at this point in time at record speed into the impact space. And to bring in a point that was just mentioned about measurability, additionalities, and using real metrics. This is something that we obviously also focus on because we want to see that embedded in the ecosystem. We need more feedback loops because at this point in time, we have lost complete touch with the feedback loops that are normally present in nature, right? Nature works as ecosystems that are in balance with themselves. So as humans, using technology, weapons, and becoming an advanced civilization, we put ourselves on top of all of this, but we haven't brought those feedback loops with us. And what happens is negative externalities, climate change, sustainability issues, and the whole spectrum that you guys are very familiar with. So we want to see those feedback loops reinstated. We want to see a real metrics. We believe that when it comes to impact and sustainability, this is also the biggest opportunity of this decade and beyond from an investment perspective, because again, it is about a new paradigm and it is about entire sectors shifting. In other words, it's not the clean part of energy, it's not the sustainable part of food, it's the entire food space, it's the entire energy space shifting. So this is a little bit what is behind CTI as a philosophy and what we focus on, as a few of you guys know already.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Alessandra. I know from interacting with you and Top Tier Impact, participating in the events there, you're doing some amazing work in the space, collecting all these stakeholders from family offices to entrepreneurs, investment funds and what have you, to catalyze these amazing initiatives that can not only unleash for-profit ventures, but also to bring about achieving those sustainable development goal targets, not just in Asia, but in the world as well. So I'll now leave it to my colleague, Alex, who will be introducing our first speaker.
Thank you, and thank you to our opening speakers, Mr. Krishnan and Ms. Solberger. And we'll now move to our panel session, and I would like to introduce Mr. Frank de Hoynt. Frank is the founder and director of the Territorial Capital Institute and Secretary General of the International Society of City and Regional Planners, which is a global association of over 700 professional planners from over 85 countries worldwide. Since 2005, Frank has worked with UN agencies in developing countries, including Kosovo, Palestine, Nepal, Afghanistan, Myanmar, China, and the Caribbean. He specializes in national urban policy, metropolitan planning, post-conflict disaster planning, and participatory visioning and placemaking. Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Can I share my screen? You have to. Somebody has to enable.
Should be good now, Frank.
Okay. I try again. All right. So I think it should be this one. And pressing the full screen mode. I hope that will work.
We see it.
You can see it. Well, I mean, the full screen mode doesn't seem to work completely, but if you can see it, that's enough. So thank you for the introduction. Certainly honored to address a few words at this joint session of Urban Economy Forum and Top Tier Impact, a very interesting coalition. I certainly would have preferred to be with all of you in the Asian Pacific region, which would certainly bring back some vivid memories of my collaborative sustainability projects in China, Japan, East Timor, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Nepal, and I even forgot indeed Myanmar. Over the past couple of months, ISOCARP and UEF have established a new and solid partnership, resulting in UEF as a major co-host of our past 56th World Planning Congress on post-oil cities, planning for urban green deals. And ISOCARP will be happily contribute to UEF's third forum and related activities such as this one. Well, you know, just to kick off the discussion, I looked into ESCAP's latest report, Asia and the Pacific SDG progress report. The most promising are goals for good health and well-being and industry, innovation and infrastructure. There is the strong economic growth in the Asia-Pacific sub-regions is very much dependent on intensive use of natural resources, resulting in a heavy material footprint that is affecting the achievement of Goal 12 on responsible consumption and production. And the pandemic could potentially double the already 640 million multidimensionally poor in the Asian Pacific region. Now, I look always very much into SDG 11, often a little bit overlooked because it's a complex one. It's not a single issue, but a multi-issue target. The region has made almost no progress on SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, only 50% of the targets could be measured, and the region is likely to miss all targets by 2030. The biggest challenges for the region are the impact of disaster on people, economies and infrastructure, air pollution, road safety, and the lack of access to basic services for people living in slums or informal settlements. Overall, the report concludes that the Asia-Pacific region is not on track to meet any of the SDGs by 2030. The region may achieve less than 10% of the SDG targets. In other words, there is a high urgency to ensure that responses to the pandemic in the region and in the national and at the national level accelerates progress towards the 2030 agenda. Well, you know, I was looking a bit into what top tier impact is developing. Very interesting. I read something on TT impact policy to create optimal conditions for all relevant stakeholders to thrive in developing practical ways to achieve sustainability. The silos must come down. I could not agree more. The silos must come down. If we work in a compartmentalized way, we will never achieve an integrated sustainable development. This is also, let's say, the motto of my organization, ISOCARP. And you know, from that perspective, I think that urban and territorial planning, some call it spatial planning, some call it city and regional planning. Okay, we have many names, but it's all about a place planning, you could say. We consider it is a key for place-based integration of sectoral sustainability policies. This requires deep dive scenario planning and community-based visioning. If you don't do it with the people, you can't claim it is done for the people. And urban and territorial planners, including what I would call the new generation of placemakers, urban and landscape designers, are needed in quality and quantity to enable plan-based change. And you know, to already anticipate a coming discussion is, we are certainly aware that we are not sufficient in quality and quantity to deliver to the job. And this is also where we call upon the private sector, because traditionally planners are employed by the public sector. But if the private sector is not helping to increase the planning capacity of humanity, we will never deliver SDG 11, and I would say by expansion all the SDGs. ISOCARP, we're a small organization, but yet we are, I believe, meaningful as a potential partners to make this happen. Yes. Our vision is very simple: make cities and regions inclusive, safe, healthy, resilient, and sustainable through integrative participatory placemaking and urban and territorial planning. ISOCARP is a global association of planning professionals, yes, but it's also a global movement to advocate sustainable planning rights to all people and their habitats. We all know about the human rights. We start to understand about environmental rights, but there is also something we would claim as planning rights. And then I just picked out a couple of statements from our joint declaration or statement on the last World Habitat Day, joint ISOCARP UEF. Urban and regional planning professionals are yet to be fully recognized as key enablers of a green urban recovery. They support both decision makers and civil society to build the essential frameworks and make large cities affordable, inclusive, and so on. We have had this. Yes, we're trying to do this for the last 100 years with ups and downs, I must agree. But there is a new momentum created with the SDGs and with what I would call the beginning of a new global theory and practice on sustainable urban and territorial planning, which is clearly enshrined in the international guidelines on urban and territorial planning, as well, of course, in the new urban agenda, which is the key tool to implement SDG 11, right? In search for better policy coordination across policy levels, we recall that national urban policies can provide a coherent set of decisions derived through a deliberate government-led process of coordinating and rallying various actors for a common vision and goal that will promote more transformative, productive, inclusive, and resilient urban development for the long term. Yes, the rest maybe you already could read yourself, just to speed up a little bit for the sake of the discussion. And I think the last one is to respond to multiple crises and to build back better and greener requires high-level urbanization expertise in national and local governments, in academia, and on the side of other stakeholders. Therefore, we call for a sufficient funding of planning institutions and capacity building for all stakeholders. With this, I would like to invite all stakeholders to take part in our upcoming 57th World Planning Congress, which is called Planning Unlocked, New Times, Better Places and Stronger Communities, which will happen soon in November, hopefully physically in Doha, Qatar. Otherwise, we will do it again virtually. Yes, and if you want to know a bit more about Isocar, just meet and join us at www.isocar.org. I am very open for some interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for sharing the connection between the work that ISOCARP is already doing related to impact economy, as well the importance of ensuring that collaboration is done in a cohesive and collective manner. And as you said, the silos must come down as well. If it's not done with the people, can't say it's for the people. Very important words. Kunal, go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. So I have the pleasure to introduce our next panel speaker, Mr. Barry Polti. He is in his main capacity the founder of EQ Capital Partners, but he's involved in a variety of initiatives in the impact investing space. He will be discussing about social housing in the US in his role as his additional role as the Chief Investment Officer of Contour Companies, and regenerative agriculture for indigenous upliftment in the context of his work with the Wonnarua Nation Aboriginal Corporation in Australia. The floor is yours, Barry.
Thank you, Kunal, and absolute pleasure to be with everybody this evening in Sydney. It's just after 8 p.m. here. So just a little bit about my background and what drives me. I'm an impact investor focused on the crossover between very disruptive technology and the application of that technology into social infrastructure projects. To me, technology is an enabler to actually then deliver major projects. My personal background, I grew up in Africa, in Zimbabwe. I actually lived through a civil war as a child. It was a really shaping event for me to actually understand that it's really important to build bridges and to actually connect people regardless of their backgrounds. I spent a long time in global investment markets, and my passion is to change the way that investment capital is actually allocated into projects. So for people who come out of a purely investment background, often it's the focus is on internal rates of return. And Anta was talking about yes, we need to make money, that's fine, but increasingly the best opportunities to make money are also those where you can do good too. So my whole focus is actually working with groups to actually change the way that capital gets allocated. And increasingly private capital is getting allocated into the right things, but it needs a bit of a push on. And the best way to do that is actually to actually deliver specific projects that actually demonstrate that the one goal of actual investment returns is not counter to the social impact outcomes that can be achieved. Just before I jump into the detail of some of the things that I'm involved in, what I'd say is, and Andrew also mentioned measurement, and I think we're at a very, very interesting checkpoint in the development of impact investing. At last count, one of my team members actually did a review of all of the impact measurement frameworks that are around that can be applied to investment situations. And there are many, 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 well in excess of, of 20. And we're sort of getting to the point now where we need to start getting some coordination and standardization. But there is hope, because I look back, going back to the late 1920s, it's hard to think about now, but in the 1920s, there actually were no generally accepted accounting standards. So even when companies were reporting results, there weren't consistent results reporting. And in fact, post the crash of 1929, what people found was that there was actually a lot of fraud that was caused by lack of consistent reporting. And I sense that we're sort of at the same point. I'm not saying, putting aside the fraud issue, but there is this lack of consistency means that there is some impact washing, as Anantha called it, right? Basically, people are saying we're doing impact, but in fact, there's no consistent measurement. So it is very important, many, many initiatives, and I'd encourage people who are interested to get across all of those many initiatives. So just some detail about some of the projects I'm involved in. I'm very international. I happen to be based in Australia. I'm stuck in a beautiful island at the moment, hermetically sealed off from the rest of the world because of COVID. But most of my work is actually outside Australia. As Kunal mentioned in his introduction, I'm also Chief Investment Officer of a US-based social real estate group called Contour Companies, and I wanted to talk about that today. So I might just share screen quickly, Kunal,
Please go ahead.
Contour Companies, which is a partner of mine in the US, is a very successful group. It's actually a fully vertically integrated real estate group doing real estate development in some of the toughest neighborhoods in the US. So we're very deliberately focused on neighborhoods which we call throwaway communities. And these are communities that have not had the opportunity to actually develop on a whole range of metrics. And at core is this lack of a place to call home. And so our focus has been on going into these areas, almost areas where other people decide not to go, it's too hard, and actually go into these hard areas and make it successful. So just some of the metrics in the US, the rental, there's a big rental crisis in the US, particularly for low-income families. And there are a lot of distressed properties in tough neighborhoods, but typically people have not been focused on them. And I think this whole COVID shift has actually changed the whole way people look at home and the need for facilities at home. So our focus has been going into these very tough neighborhoods, finding projects which are actually hard to do and doing them very well. The key, if I can just point out, is what we call full vertical integration. So a lot of people have asked, what is the success of our model? Our model includes everything from sourcing projects. We've got in-house development, architecture design capability. We've got all of the regulatory interface. We have our own construction company. We've got our own kitchen cabinet factory, our own window factory. Then the other side of the business model, which is actually how do you actually manage, maintain, and collect your rents? We have a team there of over 200 people who actually are sourced from the communities that we're actually dealing with. So this is a critical point. When you're going into communities, it's important to understand the culture, the metrics, and what's acceptable, and deal with those communities in a socially aware way. At the same time, make sure that you're actually generating those investment returns. So our team of people who go and manage, maintain, and collect rents is mostly made up of minority women. And that's actually been a key, almost magical ingredient to why we've been successful. We create huge wealth for our partners, investors. Our historic returns on projects have been well in excess of 50% equity internal rates of return. So that's a very big number in an interest rate environment of almost 0%. And yet we've been doing that without specifically focusing on additional tax benefits that investors can actually receive. So these tax benefits, which seem to be relatively bipartisan in the US, actually are in addition to the core operating performance of the projects. But this is the key for us. We're looking to provide safe, affordable housing for essential workers and forgotten communities. So many of the areas we go into, for example, an area called College Park, which is around the Atlanta airport area. Atlanta airport area is a huge commercial hub, but there's almost no accommodation in that area. And there was actually a very successful African-American community in that area before noise issues actually drove that community mostly out. And there was basically that whole community went backwards for many, many years. It was actually one of the highest crime areas in the US before when we came in, we were actually warned not to go into the area because local police department was saying, it's not safe. We actually changed the whole community and the area that we went into, where the police force was actually going from call out every day to a call out every 4 months. These are very concrete metrics, and the people there felt safe. The mayor, the local mayors was saying, this is something that is just, it was a really difficult area. How do we actually change it? A lot of government money, sort of sponsored initiatives were actually put into there, but it actually took a mix between a fairly hard-nosed approach around, we need to go in and fix the area and make sure there's good returns, with a desire to actually improve the area. So we've been successful, and we hope to continue to be successful doing that. And I'd encourage, what we discovered is the importance of partnership between the right-minded investors, the local communities, and the government authorities in those areas at both local, state, and even federal level. And just to give you an idea, where the rubber hits the road, we basically were going into areas which are pretty dilapidated. The buildings are not that great, and at the end of it, these are high quality buildings that people can live. But critically, this is not gentrification. This is actually areas where people can get high quality housing at relatively low cost and actually start building their families out. And again, as if nothing else, one of the key learnings from COVID has been that it's all fine to work remotely, but what if you don't have the right place to actually live remotely? So I'll leave it at that, and very happy to take questions on some of the metrics of what we look at and how we actually do that successfully. Right across the other side of the world, back in Australia, I also wanted to talk very quickly about another initiative that I'm involved in, which is quite different, but equally important. And I would say it's quite different from a development directly in an urban area, but it's actually looking at how communities can actually become self-sufficient and actually uplift themselves as part of their activities. So I'm working very closely. I'm working closely with the head of an Indigenous First Nations group in Australia, community in Australia, called the Wanneroo Nation. This is an Aboriginal group whose ancestral lands are in a place called the Hunter Valley, which is a couple of hours outside Sydney. The community has very large amounts of land. They also have additional land which is about to be given to them by the New South Wales state government in Australia. But unfortunately, like many First Nations groups in Australia, the social metrics for their community are actually pretty devastating. Everything from unemployment through to health, through to incarceration, through to education. So the key to all of this has been to work through, and I'm very fortunate to work with, as a friend as much as a partner, the head of the Commercialization Corporation for the Wanneroo Nation. So this is a corporation that's been set up to commercialize investment projects that can actually assist the First Nations community to actually lift themselves up with assistance and change the social impact metrics of their community. The issue that Laurie Perry, the CEO there, had was that he almost had too many opportunities. And the question was, how do you frame those investment opportunities to both deliver investment returns, but also work directly back to the social impact metrics that Laurie had worked so hard to develop and define for his community. So Laurie has created a very extensive plan, which he calls Closing the Gap, which goes back and explicitly measures and maps the things that he would like to achieve for his community. And what we're now in the process of doing is actually linking effectively an investment capital allocation process overlaid on top of that social impact metrics focus. So trying to work through which projects will deliver the best social impact returns, but at the same time also deliver some investment returns, because we want to bring in private investors, we want to bring in philanthropic investors, we want to bring in government money, and it's how do we put all this whole mix of money into one pot and actually get some outcomes. And to give you an idea, some of the things that are happening, it just so happens the area where the Wanneroo Nation have their ancestral lands, there are many mining companies that have operated in those areas. There is a lot of coal-fired power generation that has actually happened in that area. And it just so happens that one of Australia's largest coal-fired power generators has recently been announced by the operator that they'll be shutting that down in the next 18 or so months. That's actually thrown up a really interesting opportunity to actually integrate the investment analysis with the plans of that company to actually shut down their coal-fired plant. So now we start crossing over. It's not now just about direct community social impact, it's also about climate change impact. How might we incorporate some of the projects that we put into this overall mix to also deliver some metrics around climate change? And then when you go into start looking at the detail of what could be done, what you find, of course, is that we've had power generation, we've had mining. What you tend to have is a lot of contamination of land and a lot of complicated issues around the actual physical land. This is where technology comes in. So what we've now started looking at doing is, can we bring in internationally competitive technologies in things like heavy metals remediation, building materials technology that can actually take fly ash from coal-fired power stations and turn that into building materials that can actually be used for the community to build social housing. So that's a very expansive view of what we're trying to do. But again, the rubber hits the road in being able to demonstrate that we can generate both direct investment returns and direct social impact. So I'll leave it at that, Kunal, and thank you again for the opportunity to talk about it.
It was our honor, Barry. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your work with African American communities through the Concho companies in the US and with the indigenous people of the Wanneroo Nation, with your work with their corporation in the Hunter region. It's interesting too. I mean, I'll add my 2 cents here that the African American community in America and the indigenous community in Australia, there may be 2 different groups of people with 2 different histories, yet they should share so much commonalities in the kind of struggles they've endured historically, for the kind of marginalization, socioeconomically, politically, and how the problems that have emerged have got so many parallels. And while they may have gone through different cultures and what have you, there are these solutions in place that can help them, realize their full potential in achieving their outcomes. And some of the stuff that you're doing in America is applicable to Australia and vice versa as a consequence. Of course, spatial development is critical in providing housing, which will give people more security and prevents that vicious cycle of poverty, and therefore empowering them through entrepreneurship and also the agriculture supply chains. The other thing I also like you brought up is that with impact metric assessments, what I've also noticed in the impact investing space, there's often a separation between environmental outcomes and social impact. And I appreciate you trying to amalgamate those, understand the connectivity between those two to achieve the outcomes for a better world overall. Okay, I now leave it to Alex, who will take it further with the next speaker.
Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Kunal. So our next speaker is Ms. Lin Zhu. She's the director of the University Research Center for Urban and Environmental Studies at Jiangtong Liverpool University. She is committed to urban sustainable development at the local, regional, and international level. She has published intensively on property-led urban development and redevelopment, land and property market and public interventions towards urban sustainability and livability. She has work experience in international organizations such as UN Habitat, as well as consultancy with universities, as well as researching, consulting, and trainings. Lynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex, for your introduction. Let me try to share my screen. Okay. Right, and thanks a lot for providing this opportunity to share some of our views and research with you guys. And at our research center, which is focused on the study in the urban and environmental studies, particularly in the China's context, but also in the international perspective, we are concerning about the urbanization process, and also like housing is also one of the main areas that address our attention. I would like to start with saying that I think this is a very good idea to actually talk about the topic of the impact and SDGs, because very much after the COVID-19, I think one of the lessons that emphasized with us is that we realized the importance of the housing as both a basic shelter and also a hedge for the potential risks, but also potentially a place that we're going to spend a lot of time in. So when we are busy with the economic recovery, while we are also aware about the need to further improve our living environment, but of course, we need to do it in a kind of a balance with the impact and the return, after able to doing it resiliently and also contributing to the sustainability goals. As the SDG goals has been suggested that we have been need to build these sustainable cities and communities, while at the same time, as expanded the goals within the SDGs, that we realize that there is an important kind of a missing gap or important source of financing that we need to very much solve these kind of resources, so that we are able to manipulate and kind of materialize a lot of the resources. And of course, we're going to work towards more kind of a collaborative manner, in a way that we are going to work with more kind of stakeholders, achieve more sophisticated needs of the people, and at the same time, SDG and sustainable goals. So having said that, we are faced with more and more of the task, and we need to find more the kind of resources, and particularly in a very kind of long-term perspective. So within China, which I'm based in, and the country has been one of the first one to recover from the COVID attack, and in relation with actively building its resilient economic growth, it has been also speeding up its commitment to the low carbon economy, low carbon kind of neutral development, and also a better quality of life, which means in urban context that we very much need to rethink and very profoundly actually reform the way we develop the cities and areas, which used to be a kind of property-led, which has been dominating for almost 3 decades. That very often we rely on the property development sector to realize the municipal financing, and also generating the resources and realizing this physical and also economic and value creation kind of urban regeneration. But at the same time, we also realize that we cannot do things as before, in a way that we have to stop doing those large, massive kind of demolishing and kind of relocation projects. And we need to very much bring in those residents and to think about them as part of the future users of the spaces we're going to create it. While at the same time, also importantly, at a long-term basis, to involve diversified financial institutions and investors to be part of this process. So having said that, in this kind of massive change of the model that we have been exploring, not only in China, but internationally, that a number of the modes, such as cultural-led, such as government-led, community-led, they all play a role, but of course, they also face serious kind of constraints. So in this context, that we probably need to rethink what would be the kind of possible way out, and also in in a more kind of a long-term basis. And this also coincided with the time that China has been getting into the very much, as we said, the inventory stage. And within the urban context, we are also keen to moving towards more kind of a regeneration period of time, that a large number of the residential areas as a key part of the urban space that need to be very much renovated and uplifting, particularly those built before 2000s and with massive problems ranging from physical decaying, facilities lacking, and also green space and public spaces. So there is a large of the kind of how to say big problem, and also kind of a huge task to be fulfilled. And on one side, that officially there has been arguing a lot of the kind of goals we need to potentially achieve, such as reducing the energy energy conservation and reducing the emissions, improving the livability while maintaining the affordability as well, coping with the rapid aging and promoting consumptions. But at the same time, we also realize that this is a massive project to be undertaken, which involves about more than 42 million households, 4 billion square meters, and about 4 trillion RMB to be invested in this huge kind of a task, which is both a kind of comprehensive projects, but at the same time need to meet multiple kind of goals. So as a government, in facing this huge task, but also potentially able to bring in new poles of the economic growth and job creations, a number of the policy, particularly in the last few years, has been introduced, and very much trying to promoting the push towards more kind of attraction and involvement of the private sector in joining this process. On one side, it is obvious that we are kind of we are short of, and we cannot do it on mainly or solely source from the government or property developers only. But underneath this is a kind of trend which is also going on around the world, that we would say that the collaborative century is actually coming, because it is a kind of the trend that we need to build these in a kind of collaborative manner and sharing and together building and also operating. So at the same time, trying to achieve multiple goals, but diversifying the kind of resources. But having said that, it is kind of easy to say, but rather difficult to do. I think as a number of the previous speaker has been shared the views that it is really difficult and challenging to bringing those private sector into the old areas and those kind of difficult, challenging kind of context. So within that massive trials and experiments across China, we have identified, for example, this case from Beijing, which is in the Jinsong community. Again, this is a massive community being built back in the 1970s. So until now, it has faced a lot of physical, social, and kind of facilities, lack of services, and with a variety of the households that have both heavily kind of aging and also accommodating young tenants. So having said that, it's a variety of the kind of tenants background in it. So facing this kind of a massive job that private sectors has also been kind of, we have seen that the involvement of the private sector. And in this project, one of the company named the China Visionary Group, which is basically an asset management company. And they have been building this kind of a vision based on building a beautiful community operator to build a new urban residential ecosystem. Somehow they are focusing on providing a whole chain comprehensive solutions and the full cycle of the cooperation platform that they can treat the community as a kind of providing a package of renovation solutions and also managing it in a kind of long-term perspective. So this is pretty much what they did, that the first thing when they get into this community is trying to understand what is the problem, what is the perception of the residents on the problems, and also the service and the facilities that they are kind of lacking and in need desperately. So they spend a month and conducting thousands of surveys, and also build up this what we call kind of 5-party coordination mechanism that involve the residents and also government at various levels, and even the kind of academics like us, so involving in the kind of a designing of the new services and spaces, while also holding the kind of public hearing and plan selection panels to discuss and finally select. So it has gone through this kind of transparent, and although time spending, time consuming, but actually being kind of transparent and widely being recognized and accepted, and gaining those opinions and finalize the plan. And what they identify is a kind of the model, which they call the kind of renovation plus operation and property management model, that allowed them to renovate the spaces, providing those services, but also being able to run that in a kind of long-term basis. And these are some of the pictures showing the kind of before and after that they build up a kind of a plan based on the survey and a lot of kind of time spending communications that the shared shows the kind of difference and enables the services they would like to provide. And beneath that, I would like to say something about the kind of investment and the return kind of mechanism, if you like, that. I think the key question for the private sector to ask is how they can actually run this in a kind of sustainable way. And obviously there are challenges within this, and there are time to be spent and complicated relations and kind of rights and legal issues to be sorted out. And obviously there is a huge investment, which this group has, this company has actually invested about 30 million RMB with a kind of 52 item long task to be fulfilled in those kind of renovation plan. But in terms of the returns that they plan for, one is about the community business that they are allowed to run on a 20-year basis about those spaces which hasn't been efficiently used before. And also the business in terms of property management services that they are potentially can get an income. And here I like to emphasize a little bit here is the government role. So in this process, giving a kind of an unknown company for those kind of residents with various backgrounds. Here the government is trying to kind of smoothing this process, and actually they bear the burden of the 3-year property service payment, so that the company's kind of a service can be recognized and tried by the residents first, and before they commit that into a long-term basis. Well, I would like to share this example is they are actually representing a massive, various kind of experiments conducted in China at a very large and rapid pace nowadays. And of course, I think one of the guests had been mentioned that actually I really appreciate that I think Barry, you shared, you have done a lot of things and going into that kind of difficult areas. I think it's beyond that, it's not only kind of a long-term vision, which I think this company in China do really have, but also a huge courage to be involved in this kind of project. But as a kind of overall in terms of kind of market scale impact, I think there are still many things that we maybe as a studies that open a scope for studies that we need to remove. because traditionally the old area regeneration, old housing area is difficult to be renovated because the high risks, low motivation, and also uncertainty of those returns because of the complicated process, complicated rights, uncertain legal kind of relations, and also not guaranteed returns with very low transparent data to be compared with. So as a kind of conclusion and way forward, which is also some of the kind of research scopes that our research center is kind of devoting to, is we are actually thinking about, I mean, of course, we need to have those private sector to be actively involved. And this is going to be led by those visionary companies. But at the same time, we should be able to create a kind of environment which is rather encouraging them to do so, and more kind of confidently. So there are a number of issues that probably in terms of planning, in terms of policies, and in terms of financial market regulations can be considered about. And first of all, we think that probably there are a lot of the kind of guidance and measures, standards, kind of criteria, procedures can be specified and to provide more certainty and predictability. Secondly, is we think about actually we can probably allow for more flexibility, because as the case suggested that to enable those kind of investment return opportunities, we may probably lose some of the policy and planning kind of regulations, and providing some flexible use of the land, maybe densities as well. And further about the kind of a market oriented financing sources. Here, we probably can think about loans, tax, and also like equity investment and REITs. But having said that, it's still kind of like a long way to go. But I think we also have seen some of the kind of positive sign that I think recently around the world, that we have been talking a lot about these ESG investments, and quite kind of positively that we have learned that many of the companies, they realize that paying attention to environmental, social, and governance concerns does not only compromise, but probably also bring values. And I think this is something that rapidly happening in China as well. But of course, the quality of these disclosure should be much improved in terms of quality, and also the kind of consistency, that in a way that we need to build more awareness, understanding, and predictability of those potential investment opportunities in those hard, difficult, but going to be very rewarding places. So this is pretty about much what I want to share with you guys, and I look forward to discuss more about you in the later on this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It was great to hear about your perspective on the need to reform property-led urban development. Just as many as the other speakers said, you spoke to the importance of having partnership among multi-stakeholders. And of course, attracting more of the private sector in this in urban development is important. And of course, it's not easy, especially to identify the investments, securing long-term investments. You did outline a few ways moving forward, detailing, composing detailed measures and guidelines, policy innovations and flexibility, and expanding market-orientated financing sources as some ways to move forward in this field. I'm going to move to our next speaker, which is Mr. Henry Chen. So Dr. Henry Chen leads CRBE's investor thought leadership across all regions and overseas all research activity in Asia Pacific. Henry also spent several years with the Dutch Bank Group, where he had numerous roles ranging from global real estate strategist. He was also based in London to co-head of real estate for Asia Pacific for their private banking business. Henry is also a visiting professor at Oxford Brookes University and an assistant professor at National Taipei University in Taiwan. Go ahead, Henry.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. By the way, can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, I apologize because we do experience quite a back power cut in Taipei throughout whole day today because we got a power plant station. So my flat currently have no power at all. So I am using the my battery to run through the presentation, and hopefully it works with you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry. I'm running the research department for Asia Pacific for CBRE. So you can see CBRE is a commercial real estate services. So what I'm going to share with you today is talking about what the future of the office is going to look like, plus what the Asia Pacific 2030 is going to look like from the people point of view, from the earth point of view, from the built environment point of view. So I'm going to condense my presentation probably around 15 minutes to walk you through about what we are seeing in the market. But first of all, we are in a pandemic period. So my research team, we construct the CBRE City Recovery Index. We track 23 cities across Asia Pacific from qualitative to quantitative measures, variables, and put in the quant methods. So you can see any color with the green, that is very open, life as usual, but with the pinkish color, that probably we are still struggling to come back with COVID-19. So clearly on a global scales, I have to say Asia Pacific, without a doubt, we are leading the global. And but within Asia is a huge variation. Recovery is very uneven. You can see North Asia, outside Tokyo, is pretty much more or less back to normal. I show a link in China, is really back to normal. Every day people back to the offices. Where I am in Taipei is the same. Also for Pacific, you can see, although they experienced a harsh lockdown in 2020, they are pretty much back to normal. You can see Southeast Asia emerging markets, as well as India, continue to struggling, and which shows that city economy recovery situations, which you can link later on to talk about sustainability growth in those emerging markets. And then over the past 12 months, we've been talking a lot about offices dying, office no need to come to the offices, and people can work from home. I have to say, this is not the thesis we believe. This is not the thing we believe globally. And because we did so many studies and globally and within Asia Pacific, what I'm going to share with you, this is Asia Pacific result. You can see in the early part of this year, we did an occupier survey across Asia Pacific. More than 70% of our corporates in our region, they said, we want people to back to the offices. And back to the offices is very, very important. Could be back to the office on a daily basis, or we come to the office and we configure out the workplaces, or even have more of a flexible working patterns. But nevertheless, I want people to be back to the offices. In the right-hand side, we do believe flexibility will be here to stay. Can you imagine? It's less than 20% of the companies in our region that say you can work from home on a full-time basis. And but majority of us still want to go back to the office. In Taipei, I think 100% of the people back to the offices. Hong Kong, China, Tokyo, even for Korea, our office is pretty much back to normal. That shows you the company are encouraging people to back to the offices. However, the office asset is going to be hugely different after COVID-19. So we asked the major occupiers, what are you looking for? What are the future proof of office assets? After COVID-19, there's three big categories. The darker green is talking about flexible spaces. Flexible spaces is do we have a flexible spaces option? I don't want to sign up for 10-year leases in Australia or in London. I want to sign up for 5 years, but I also have the flexibility. I can expand or contract. So flexible space option is super important. And share meeting rooms. How many times you use your meeting rooms in your offices? So therefore, that space can be reduced and to share the spaces. That's very important. But most important part, if you look at that lighter green color, it shows sustainability. Sustainability comes out quite important, particularly on the indoor air qualities, as well as the sustainability buildings. That is something quite high in the agenda. As a result, you can see the green and healthy workplaces is important. We're also expecting to see the future office is going to be more of a hotelization. A lot of services in the offices together, increasing by using the technology to enhance the collaborations. So future of offices, the office, we all know that is engagement, innovation, and collaboration. So this is very interesting. We asked the occupiers, if the remote working is better, which you choose the far left-hand side. If you think about workplace are better, you choose the far right-hand side. You can see working in the offices is better for engagement, innovation, and the team productivities. And the only one categories we are seeing working from home is a lot better, is cost effective. So when you are reading on those newspapers, the people working from home permanently, they are hugely productivity is very, very high. It's not true. So you can see offices is increasingly important. Cost is probably one of the major issues. A company, I think you can work from home. It's more accessible, more. As a result, what does it mean for the future of workplaces? I think the left-hand side is very dull, very boring. It's a traditional working environment. But on the right-hand side, you can see the future of workplaces is very, very cloud-enabled. So you can see I've been operated out of Taipei for 12 months, normally I'm based in Hong Kong, but because of technology, allow me to manage my team, allow me to engage our key stakeholders. This cloud-enabled workplace is very important. Also, traditional working environments, all the cubicles. If you still operate a cubicle environment, probably your office after COVID-19 need to restart thinking about it, because the future is all about core spaces plus the flexible usage of your spaces. So this 4 charts just to give you the ideas about the future of workplace design. So the current, you can see very stale, not very flexible. But you can see for the future, you can make sure you got a social distancing, partitioning. Also, you also have the quieter places to conduct the private codes. So that is what we are seeing for the future of workplaces. But I have to highlight, one size doesn't really fit all. Because when I was talking to one of major banks in the US, they said, I don't want to change. After COVID-19 will be the same as usual. But when I was talking to one Australian bank, they're thinking about this is the future way of working. I want to change it to my office environment, to either activity-based environment, to team, or to event. The fundamental difference between those 3 environments is the space between me and we. And we is more collaboration, me is more isolated. So as a result, in our region, I have to say we are not as negative as people are thinking. And then we are seeing 22% of Asian companies, they are further expanding for their office environment and office spaces. So this is the room to grow for Asia Pacific is definitely going to happen. So now I am going to switch the gear to talk to you guys a little bit more about what I am seeing for Asia Pacific 2030. But first of all, this is quite cliche. I think we know that the Asia Pacific GDP by the end of 2030 is account for just under 50% of the global share of the GDP. We all know about it. But the story is not always good. One of the major issues we are concerning is working populations. Did you realize even for of course Japan working population is declining for such a long time. Even for mainland China, you can see the working population is also declining. And at some point, it's going to be a negative territory, which creates a lot of concern about the productivities. As a result, we are seeing the Asian government is thinking we are living longer. Therefore, the retirement age probably could be a potential. So if you look in the green bar is actually the population change between after the retirement age. So you can see, and the gray bar shows the typical working age. The working age is declining, but actually the population for those kind of retirement age is increasing. So you can imagine if the people retire a lot later, so they can potentially be complement for those shortfall of those working populations. And I saw the news a few days ago. I think China is also expecting to extend the retirement age. And a lot of people thinking about they're going to retire from 55 to 60. So Singapore is from 63 to 65. So you can see all the Asian governments are taking very, very serious about the working age issues. That's the people side, population side. But if I'm looking at the Earth, the planet side, just looking at the range of these climate risks, Asia Pacific, we are so exposed to the climate changes. So therefore, sustainability growth, the sustainability environment is super important. But you can see a lot of people thinking about, it's all about emerging markets. Yes, emerging markets is suffering a lot. This is Jakarta in the left-hand side chart. You can see that Jakarta is because they're pumping the underground water all the time. So you can see by 2025, the darker colors, it shows you those areas is going to be under the seawater, which is quite substantially. And in the middle part, those commercial real estate markets, I said more than 250 buildings, they are pumping the water under the ground illegally. As a result, it causes serious damage for the environment. So they are talking about they want to relocate the capital to the other location by 2024. But you are thinking about this is only for emerging markets. But how about mature markets? We're also suffering the same thing. This is Japan. That is Hong Kong. During the Rugby World Cup, typhoon caused a huge damage. On the right-hand side, another typhoon, super typhoon, that's in the central, grade A office buildings. That's how it takes. And each one will cost you probably 6 million of the cost to replace it. Okay, I'm sorry, my power is back on, so I might sound a little bit strange because the power is back on. And as a result, we're looking at the government, how the Singapore government is going to dealing with those issues. So you can see the Singapore government try to understanding the climate changes and also to mitigate the climate changes by reducing carbon emission, by charging the tax. And also for the Singapore government, they are even super smart. You know what they do? They are increasing the buildings at sea level by 4 meters. So all the things they are doing is quite proactive on that part. And then in terms of the greenhouse, you can see real estate is super important. It's a 40% of the carbon emission dioxide is coming from the real estate. As a result, all the major economies, we are talking about net zero energy buildings. And if you look at these slides, you think about net zero buildings is super easy. I tell you that when I was talking to one of the major developers in Hong Kong, they had the green buildings, but they can only generate renewable energy by 2%. 98% they still consume normal powers. It's simply because the government is not helping at all. Government doesn't have the policy to support on that part. Green financing is also important in our region. Singapore is definitely well ahead of the curve. Final few slides, I just told you about populations, urbanization. Urbanization doesn't sound so scary, but 50% to 57%. But you can see how many people are going to move into the cities, 400 million people moving into the cities. And lots of cities are in mega cities. Those people are living in those mega cities. 22 cities, we got more than 10 million populations, which will cause tons of issues, energy issues, pollution issues, congestion issues, and living quality issues. So all the things that we all continue to facing a struggle. As a result, I'm very happy to hear Lin was talking about infrastructure investments, but not only in China, across Asia Pacific, all the government are upgrading, spending more money into infrastructure. You know, by 2040, it's a 23 trillion. It's going to increase more and more. Final two slides. Sharing is going to new normal. after COVID, I do believe a shared economy is going to be super important. You know, cars, co-living, and co-working is going to be super important. This is the final slide. How the commercial real estate going to look like in Asia Pacific? We will have more new buildings. The more new buildings is going to equip with those ESG features, and the formation of the new cities is definitely going to happen. And then there's a formation of new cities will translate into new transportation hubs. The buildings, no single usage anymore. We are going to see the multiple usage in the new buildings, and also the new buildings, wellness, sustainability features is very important. Niche sectors also being very important. Final part, we are going to see more institutions, pensions, government is going to be participating to drive that economy forward, to drive the commercial real estate more sustainable and more green. So that's all for me. Apologize, my son's a little bit rushed because the power is giving me a lot of trouble. I'm sweating now, and back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Henry, and I'm glad that there were no hiccups during the presentation. I appreciate your great overview of the Asia Pacific region in what it will look like in 2030 and how we're transitioning now. As well, your presentation on the future of the office. More than 70% back to work in the office was a surprising statistic for me. I mean, I don't know the stats here in Canada, and I hope they are lower because I do like working from home. Anyways, I will turn it back to Kunal to introduce our last speaker before we move to discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. I have the honor to present to you Mr. Professor Joe Mcdonald. He is the founder of the architectural firm A&O Design, and he's also a former associate professor from the Harvard University. He's definitely done some very interesting things in the impact investing and architectural space over the past few years, which he'll definitely discuss in his presentation now. So he'll be focusing on the rise and need of net zero data centers globally, followed by his insights into the Golden Leaf of London and Highline projects as case studies, particularly in relation to the topic of built ecologies and the importance of biodiversity in urban settings. Please go ahead, Joe.
Thanks, Kunal. Hi, everybody. It's interesting to go last because I think that there's been a lot of overlap between the topics that have been so really fantastically presented today. So I will share my screen. I'm going to move through a very large deck. And the reason I'm doing that is, yes, we are a design firm based in New York City. So we operate within the AEC space, architecture, engineering, and construction space. But I also have one foot in academia. I'm a professor at University of Pennsylvania. So that underwrites a lot of the research that we are able to do with emerging materials and how to get to net zero in architectural projects. So, you know, I think just to conclude on behalf of the speakers, I think that the general theme that we are talking about is we're coming out of 12 months of an era of convergence. So here in America, that not only includes sustainability goals, but it also includes societal goals. We have, you know, it's a convergence between race relations, sustainability, property development, community development, and it's really felt heavily within the academic community. So I will move very quickly. Again, the things as Kunal mentioned that I would like to talk about is as a firm, we are committed to not building new. So we have a very large portfolio of retrofit building projects, both in the EU and now under the Biden administration in the US. So again, we are committed to not building new, but when we have to build new, we build to net zero based on our research and academia. So what you're looking at here is a project called Project Energize. It's in Nevada. It's for developer TerraScale. Again, I have to move very quickly through the slides because there are 160 of them. So just, I will give you the highlights of the deck. And you can just pull the names as you see them. I will address blockchain in a moment. So here's this, we won the Opal Award in London for this building. This is a net zero data center. The way to get to net zero on a data center is very difficult. Of course, the data racks within the data center are extremely hot. So you have to offset that by hybrid energy, which includes solar and geothermal. This is a large kind of plot of land where there were multiple components to it, all of which are made out of recyclable materials: steel, polyethylene, aluminum. This is CLT with green roofs, cross-laminated timber. We're also, we operate within the architecture, landscape, and urban planning space. So we do design landscape. And now let's move very quickly through this, talking about low carbon concrete, the additives that we're able to use now to get to low carbon: lightweight concrete, aerated concrete, self-compacting concrete. We, in the US, LEED is the predominant rating agency that we use. We also take into account where we are sourcing our materials from. They need to be close. Photovoltaic concrete. And of course, solar. And there are multiple suppliers of solar. We're also experts at green roof technology. It's a very complicated system. Here are some construction details of green roof construction. Also, we're known for green walls, both exterior and interior. I'm just hoping that you're all taking this in. There are, again, many ways to get to net zero, including rubberized asphalt, the manufacturers. This is quite important. This is called what we call the red list. It's provided by a rating agency called the PEDAL project, the Living Building Challenge. So all of the items in red are items that we cannot use in our construction projects. Now to move on to biophilia and the importance of biophilia in urban settings. And this is a global phenomenon which is now taking place. I was part of the early development of the Highline project in New York City 20 years ago. We're now doing a similar project. This is another TTIer, Elizabeth Marsh. This is her project. I'm on the leadership team. she's really asking the question, you know, now that we've been on lockdown for a year, you know, surely we must come out of this with our value systems changed. I agree with her. So what we're seeing within the architectural community, this is a letter written by David Attenborough to Liz, offering his support. So what we're seeing in the architectural community is a lot of pro bono work. It's no longer about the bottom line. It's about what our expertise can do for cities. These are the various spurs in London that are connected to the A4. The A4 is the route that we have selected east-west that runs through London. And along that route, we will be planting vegetation, green roofs, green walls, and parks. And this is the site of an exhibition in November. I'm happy to share this deck with you afterwards. I just want to make sure that we get through it. We get very specific. We also are, we have ecology botanists on staff. We get very specific with the materials that we use, right down to the flora and fauna. So biodiversity within dense urban settings is happening everywhere. It's happening all over the world. It's happening in Barcelona. It's happening in Bonn. It's happening in Buenos Aires. It's happening in Paris. And this is the project that I was involved in. We started in 1999, we have just raised the final $60 million to extend the High Line from where it currently lands, which is the Whitney Museum, south to Penn Station. So what we were able to do, you know, the question becomes, how do you fund these projects? Well, what we did was we began to isolate segments of the route and approach donors, both corporate and individual donors. And we gave them naming rights to certain segments of the High Line. And there's an app associated with it. And what happened with the development of the High Line, which runs north-south in Manhattan on the west side, is that architectural landmarks, residential towers began to sprout up along the High Line. The property values skyrocketed, and 7 Pritzker Prize winning architects built along the High Line, including here we have Frank Gehry, we had Zaha Hadid, Shigeru Ban, Jean Nouvel, Renzo Piano here at the Whitney Museum. This is my last slide. So if you can see, this is currently the end of the High Line here where my cursor is. And we're about to move 30 blocks south to Penn Station, the new Monahan rail station. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe, for that excellent presentation on your work in helping greenify, you could say, cities around the world. It's great that, like, you know, particularly in a developing context, I know you've shown a number of case studies in more developed areas, but which of course have had issues with, like, you know, trying to gentrify former low-income housing areas, or well, areas that have been abandoned, and trying to improve communities through that respect. Asia can learn a lot from what kind of work you have done. So like I've also been pleased to also be involved with you on the Golden Leaf project in London, how we can help create those green belts. And like there are all these cities in Asia, like of course you've done some work in China, those sprawling cities like New Delhi. Delhi has a lot of green, places like Calcutta, Jakarta, Bangkok, and what have you, Manila, where they're such sprawling metropolises. They like greenery, and people like particularly families, they cannot enjoy recreational pursuits, and also the fact that these cities have far more pollution because of lack of greenery space. And could you imagine if you create these vertical farms and like lanes, it could also not only just greenify the place, improve the environment, but also provide ameliorations in social outcomes. Like there have been case studies in like places like Korea where they've created green belts which have helped to reduce crime. And also because apparently psychological studies indicate that, and I'm sure you know more than I would on this, that greenery also helps to calm people down, pacify them. And there's a lot we can learn from that. We can look at Japanese style gardens, for example, and how that's incorporated in architecture.
Absolutely. I think the significance for Southeast Asia is clear. The major metropolitans that I have worked in include Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. I'm very interested in moving our practice into Singapore and also into South Korea. We have opportunities that are coming online for work there. The significance of bringing biodiversity into urban settings is that it brings along with it flora and fauna. For example, insects, butterflies, birds that have not only a calming effect on society, but they also present a whole new microclimate into these kind of concrete jungles. And I can't overemphasize how important that is. I just want to make one point about disparity. And the inequities that we're seeing in the United States. As we move into dense urban settings that are depressed, not only do we need to work towards regenerative housing projects, those housing projects not only do they need to occur, but they need to be built by the community itself. Although they are investment opportunities, there are also opportunities for financial awareness and success of the actual residents themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are all very valid points, and particularly as you rightly stated, in the case of America, there's been exacerbations in political unrest, partially because of COVID, the issues with the elections last year, we'll not go into all the controversies that accumulated from both those issues. And of course, some of them are still ongoing. But as you rightly stated, if we create cities in such a way that amalgamate greenery with aesthetics, which something along lines you're doing, it can sort out a lot of these problems from a spatial development angle, and also have an impact on communities and even just families, office spaces, and what have you. These all interconnected ultimately. Yes. So thank you again very much, Joe, for your amazing insights. So we're now got the Q&A discussion section at the moment. So you as the speakers can provide some extra insights if you feel it's necessary, or we have prepared from our end a set of questions which you can happily answer too. So we leave it up to you. Who would like to start? Anyone?
Kunal, I would sorry, Kunal, I would just like to encourage the speakers, if they have any questions for the other speakers, or as Kunal said, additional insights. Now is the time to share it. So please feel free to go ahead.
I just quickly wanted to underscore Dr. Lynn's comments. I found her presentation to be really uplifting and very comprehensive. Retrofitting buildings is not a glamorous exercise, but it's an imperative for communities we're no longer bulldozing cities and building new. We're actually taking the existing housing stock and simply upgrading it. And I just really admire Dr. Shu's presentation.
And Joseph, just on that point, in the US, the work that we're doing, we're trying very hard to use existing form when we're actually doing the refurbishment. So one of the big areas is actually, we're very focused on particular states in the US, not West Coast or East Coast. But in some of the states, you have a lot of old factories, with old beautiful smokestacks and beautiful skins, but obviously that's sort of been let to go. And we've actually done a number of projects in those skins, and they actually come out really beautifully. And there's a lot of heritage around that.
Wonderful.
Thank you. So we have one member of the audience who sent a message about us. Thank you, Barry and Joe, for sharing your insights on this. He's brought up a very good question in the chat about displacement. See, he wanted to ask about, can one speak on the issue of displacement and gentrification as an outcome of green interventions or placemaking initiatives which raise the value of the lands?
Sorry, Kunal, I just want to, if Lynn had any comments that she wanted to
sorry about that.
respond to Joe, Lynn, please feel free to go ahead.
Oh, okay, thanks, Alex, for making available. And I just want to say thank you for Joe's comment. And as you said, that the retrofitting is a really complex and challenging, and particularly in China's context, the same that we have, because it's a kind of, I think the process of the rapid urbanization itself also brings a more complex to the cities in China. And here in our center, we also have people working on from the kind of building perspective, kind of modeling the kind of the process and with the design options, and also the social kind of process. So as you said, I think I will be very interested and happy to share more kind of details if needed in the future. And I also find your biodiversity topic is really fascinating, and I join the pictures a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to address Rafa's question in the chat box because I feel it's very much directed towards me. Rafa, yes, it is true that along the High Line, there was massive displacement in Manhattan because what happened in the 30s, Manhattan is laid out on a grid, right? The north-south axes are called the avenues, and traffic runs very quickly north-south, and then against that are the streets, and they run rather slow. But in the 30s, there was a district called the Garment District, and that was where all of the garments were made in Manhattan. And yes, they were completely displaced. So there was an economic upheaval to that community. The second example that you may not know of is called the Mitchell Llama Act, which was set in place for housing developments in Manhattan to make sure that there was worker housing within either subway or walking distance to work. The Mitchell Llama Act was overturned a couple of decades ago. And what happened to that housing stock, it went to market rate. So New York City, which is not only Manhattan, but it includes 5 boroughs. The Manhattan is is a case study that we need to continue to look at. Everyone, I live in Brooklyn. Everyone has been displaced from Manhattan. So it is a huge problem. And thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Joe, for answering that question. There is another question here from Vaishali. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And they are saying, could you please speak about environmental and social management system that entail criteria to ensure CO2? For PPP to work, what financial models are being explored to develop loan products that will allow small and medium-sized businesses to acquire new technologies that are energy efficient and environmentally friendly? And then there's also a follow-up here saying, please keep in mind that many S&M businesses are producing green building materials and beyond.
Well, I mean, again, I'll jump in. The ESG carbon management plan, pressure 2030, 2050 used to be an EU phenomena. It is now very much a global phenomena, especially here in the United States. With the Biden administration signing back onto the Paris Climate Accord. So this is now a global phenomena, and corporates are racing to come up with carbon management plans by 2030, 2050. In my business, there's a tremendous amount of work to be done.
I think this, for ESG and we call it ESGR. The other one we haven't addressed is resilience. In a commercial real estate world, people more care about the E and R, environmental. We talk about real estate produces so much pollution on that part. And then now I can very happy to say, the payback periods of putting in the environmental proof buildings is a lot shorter. In the old days, people think about 10, 20 years, but global standards, the payback periods are a lot shorter, 3 to 5 years can pay back. And also building all the green buildings now is actually a similar cost as what you building on what we call brown buildings. That's one thing. Also in the Western community, particularly in the UK, if you as an owner having a brown building, which is not energy efficient buildings, we will have a brown discount, which means you're going to charge a lot lower rent. The corporate doesn't want to occupy the buildings. So I think going forward, we are going to see more and more ESG coming to the building, coming to the spaces. But it's not coming from the landlords now. Actually, it's actually coming from the occupiers, the corporates. That everyone got an ESG standard, ESG ambition. We all need to meet for that. But something we need to be mindful is net zero buildings. I think it's easy to say we got net zero buildings in 2030. But to be honest with you, we won't be able to have a net zero buildings by 2030 on a global scales. Even UK are doing so much work. I don't think it's possible to do so. As a result, so many corporates need to buy green finance, green credit. Okay, I produce the CO2, I do some trees over there. It's not actually called net zero. I think this is more of a bigger issue for us to address going forward, because as we want to have a natural net zero energy efficient buildings, rather than you create a lot of pollution, you plant a tree somewhere. And this is the bigger issues in my mind. But definitely ESG is the top of everyone's agenda. Over my course, over the past 2 months, everyone is talking about ESG plus R, resilience.
Yeah.
Dr. Chen, I'll just very quickly, I want to follow up on that, because you're absolutely right. The developers are under pressure by the people that you represented, CBRE, the tenants. The tenants will not move into these assets unless they are meet certain ESG requirements. So what's happening with developers, if they don't do it, they end up with stranded assets, and nobody will want to occupy the building, right?
Yeah, but we call it brown discount.
Yeah, and on the positive side, Joseph, there's a great example in Australia, a group called Lend Lease, which is one of our top integrated developers, big footprint in the US, big footprint in Asia. I mean, they actually have developed their whole reputation. I actually worked in Lend Lease many years ago, but the ethos of sustainability was going back 30 years. And now what's happening is that the projects are all, they're leased up very quickly, but equally on the capital side, the money is coming in from institutional investors to back those projects and new projects. So, Lend Lease won, an Australian headquartered company won the big Google project in California to redevelop, their whole huge campus. They won that. I know some of the people on that project. They won it because of the sustainability criteria, and part of how they present it, they've also got a funds management business, and I think that 4 of their funds were in the top 10 globally in the world around both returns and direct sustainability metrics. So that gets you the new projects, gets you the new money as well.
Yeah.
I think one thing for the green financing, I think become compulsory if we look at a TCFD. I think TCFD at this point of time is pretty much largely driven in the UK. They want to be mandatory to highlight the report on the risk on the climate. I think the TCFD is going to roll out in Europe. I think sooner or later it's going to be a global standard. As a result, I think this is something, it's early stage, been on for a long time, but I think finally ESG sustainability, it become main traction among our communities.
Okay. Any other comments before we go further? Okay. Well, thank you all. I have one question from my end. I thought which nicely connects with some of the stuff you've raised, but we haven't entirely touched upon, but still very much affects the Asia region. So, albeit the debilitating effects caused by the COVID epidemic, conflict and civil unrest is often another major detriment for achieving ESG outcomes in many countries in the Asia Pacific region. Aside from security mitigating measures, how effective can businesses be in fostering an impact economy that will provide the socioeconomic prosperity to hinder the recrudescence of conflict still plaguing a lot of these countries in the region? We have touched a little bit on civil unrest and crime areas in housing developments, for example. But we're talking about more conventional war, areas where there are rebellions, insurgencies, civil war, and what have you, and how that relates with impact investing.
Yes.
It's a great question, Kunal. And I think the model needs to be quite different. I mean, I grew up in Africa, so it's
Yep.
I grew up in Zimbabwe, so it's just a very different perspective. And I think a lot of the integrated solutions we talk about here may not be where we start, right? So, but there's some big technological developments in things like 3D printing. There's quite a well-known US group that is literally printing concrete houses. I think their first proof of concept was in Mexico. They were generating fully livable homes. I think it was $8,000 to $10,000 US. They were very livable. So it's a different perspective around what's possible in those conflict situations. You've got to get very creative, and the financing around that may be a different mix compared to more developed markets, perhaps.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Go on.
Just to follow up on that, not only conflict, but also something that seems to be lurking in the shadows is the fact of sea levels rising. So, for example, India and Pakistan, I mean, the displacement that will be faced in those two nations is extraordinary in the next decade. Where will those people go?
And we can add Bangladesh in the mix too, where it's, much of it's under sea level, and it's a most crowded country in the world of 100. I think it's the 150 million people. It's the size of a small state of Tasmania. Well, it's actually a relatively big landmass. I think it'd be the size of Pennsylvania, Bangladesh, and there's like over 150 million people there. So we wait.
I see Frank's hand up.
Yes, I would like to contribute to Kunal's question about working in conflict areas or conflicted areas. I have some experience working in Kosovo, Palestine, Afghanistan, Myanmar, East Timor. So yeah, I have a bit of a feeling what to do, what not to do. If you rely too much on government, there is almost nothing you can do. Everything is very politicized and so on. So what we need is a kind of different approach in what I call self-help planning and development. Really, the bottom-up education of people and communities to help themselves dealing with their own challenges, whether it is climate or disaster, the conflict itself, basic needs, and so on. And I feel we are not well equipped to really help communities, let's say in a bottom-up way. Yeah, it's usually top-down, even if we pretend there is a lot of participation and consultation, it is usually still very top-down. So within ISOCARP, we established something called Global Planning Aid. And Global Planning Aid is basically developing a platform for self-help based on digital tools to understand, to analyze the planning situation of a certain place, a certain community, and to use a set of tools to self-learn, self-develop, eventually with help from local, regional NGOs, civil society, that are trained by international society. Yes, but not the traditional, almost like post-colonial model of international organizations going into conflict areas and telling them what to do. It does not work. It takes years before you really understand the conflict, the psyche of people, and you're wasting your and their time. So yeah, we're looking at a new business model. I heard Barry talking about looking for interesting hybrid business models between private, public, civil society. Well, we're also looking into a business model for what we call barefoot planning education.
Well,
go ahead, Kunal.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you, Frank, for your insights and your work experience in these conflict regions, and of course, Joe bringing up the issues with water security and how that even interconnects with national tensions, and of course, Barry, your time growing up in conflict-prone Zimbabwe definitely shows insights on creativity in these kind of environments. So, our Secretary General, Mr. Krishnan, has an interesting question to ask us.
Thank you, Kunal and Alex. I just was wondering, as Frank was also talking about, the main challenge now we have is the rapid urbanization that is taking place in most of the developing countries. Yeah, so most of the urbanization in developing countries is taking place in a way that is different from what we are discussing here, namely in New York or Washington or Canberra, Sydney, or wherever it is. So the question of slums, urban development, and housing for all in countries like India or Philippines for that matter. How do we get impact investment to really focus on these issues that are not only environmental, it is also social and economic. And these are people who are not really bankable, you know. And how do we sort of create an environment, a system by which actually the impact investment addresses this huge problem or issue of housing for all in developing countries? That is something that I think we will have to seriously take into account. That's also where even the huge development banks like World Bank or Asian Development Bank, they're all talking about it, but investments are not really coming to the housing and infrastructure, basic water, sanitation, etc., being made available. The kind of COVID pandemic now we are witnessing in many parts of the world, not least in Asia and Latin America, is mainly because of the lack of impact investments in these sectors like health or housing, or for that matter, just basic living. So it's a big challenge. How do we address this? Are there ways in which we can generate some sort of momentum in sort of having a huge effort, a kind of a Marshall Plan, if you want, for addressing this?
Would any speaker like to respond to that or contribute?
This is a fascinating question, I have to say, but when I was looking at the development of Singapore, you can see Singapore coming from the fishing village, people are relatively poor. I think the government is putting quite a nice regime. Lee Kuan Yew put a nice regime and then make sure every single person will have a place to stay. So therefore, you can see that the affordable housing, state housing, and for Singapore resident has been on since the 50s, 40s. I think this is something, I think for Southeast Asia, or in the case for India, I do feel like the government need to play the key role to support the living environment, the clean water, clean sewage. I think those are basic infrastructure. Sometimes it's not there for emerging market. I do think about the government need to do more things. I think that's how China is doing it, how Singapore, how Hong Kong is doing so. I think the government need to play the key role. But given the current stages of more globalization, I do think about private sector can also play the key part to provide us affordable housing. I think that's just my personal opinion.
Thank you so much, Henry. So we are at just over 1 minute of our 2-hour session. So I would like to thank all the speakers greatly for your participation. I think we had a lot of great presentations and great discussion. So the video will be, it's being recorded, and we will share it with all the participants and the speakers for your own use as well. I'll turn the final remarks to Kunal and our Secretary General of Urban Economy Forum, Krishnan, if you have any kind of final statement you'd like to make before we conclude.
No, I would say it has been a very, very productive and engaging session, wherein we are able to bring in different parts of the world, how the impact investments actually have produced results, and addressing the environmental, social, and economic aspect of it. And I think these are examples that needs to be made more aware and replicated and upscaled. Again, as I said earlier in the morning, that Urban Economy Forum and the World Urban Pavilion would indeed be an important avenue or a place where we can have these kind of examples being presented, and upscaling is an important issue that we need to look into. That especially what Barry's presentation talking about, how he has been working with minority communities, indigenous people. These are examples that are well usable in otherwise also. Other question of urban agriculture and greening of cities. And this is something that is fascinating to sort of address not only urbanization as buildings and roads, also the question of greening of cities and biodiversity, combining with full food security. I suppose something that is quite fascinating. And then again, I think Henry and was quite engaging in talking about how we should rethink the whole question of office buildings. I mean, they are no longer in the post-COVID context. Also, the long context is opened our eyes, just not have office buildings, just have use of 8 hours of the day, the rest of it, not being used. These are the challenges we need to really address, sort of, spaces of using built-up spaces in a more human-friendly and tangible way. That's something we need to think about. And the role of government, of course. China has indeed shown some good examples of this, and how long, this is possible. I mean, to what extent it's possible in other countries, it's worth seeing. And also sort of interesting to see the whole idea of how planners and architects doing a lot of pro bono work indeed can be engaged in stimulating not only this discussion, creating a community of activists to think about impact investment, not only in terms of money, but also of intellectual capacities and investment that way. I think it has been a fascinating session. I would thank all of you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krishnan, for your insights. I will try to be as brief as possible because I know we are very much short on time. So I'll just provide my own holistic well, thank yous for this. Well, thank you all the speakers for providing these very interesting perceptions on how to attain SDGs through impact investing and for the impact economy in the Asia context. Now, how we can learn from lessons from the past, present, in other regions who have also gone through similar issues, socio-economic political issues that many Asian countries currently face in order to improve the future. And ultimately, I think we can agree upon that one thing we have learned in this webinar is that despite the, on the surface, very seemingly different or very far off case studies or issues or populations or even cultures, all these issues are interconnected. If you address something, it helps address the other ones as well. And we can create these initiatives to create, catalyze amazing changes from simultaneously in many countries. So everything's interconnected. And thank you all for for what you have provided for us today, and wishing you all the very best. And we look forward to bring you on board for more of our webinars in the near future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you indeed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for
Bye.
coming. Bye.
Bye-bye.